Hey, folks, welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio. Now, Maryland may be a small state, but it contains a remarkable variety of strange, unexplained activity. From the wooded river valleys of central Maryland to the Catoctin Mountains, from back roads of Prince George's County to rural farms of Cecil County, Maryland, has produced decades of cryptid sightings, phantom figures, strange lights, winged anomalies, and high-strangeness encounters. And for this episode of Phantoms and Monsters Radio, we're going to examine several Maryland cases that stand out for their locations, witness details, and continuing irreverence. Now, some of these reports are rooted in folklore, some are modern eyewitness accounts, some are personal investigations, and a few are connected to my own experiences in the field. Now, we will begin in Patapsco River corridor because for me, this part of Maryland is personal. Now, one of the most compelling Bigfoot clusters in Maryland centers on the Patapsco River corridor, especially the area around Sykesville, Daniels, and Patapsco Valley State Park. This region already has a history. In the early 1970s, the so-called Sykesville Monster became part of Maryland's local cryptid lore after reports of a large, hairy, unknown creature circulated throughout the area. Years later, on May 9th, 1981, I had my own Bigfoot encounter near Sykesville along the south branch of the Patapsco River. That encounter became one of the defining events in my life as an investigator, but I don't believe it was isolated. In August 2015, a woman and her daughter were walking in the Daniels area of Patapsco Valley State Park. It was about 6:45 p.m. in the evening before school started. They had walked roughly 35 minutes down the trail along the river when they noticed several deer standing motionless on the hillside. The deer were not feeding. They were not moving. They were frozen. The witness then heard heavy footfalls nearby, but chose not to alarm her daughter. A short time later, her daughter said she did not feel good and wanted to leave. And as the mother turned back toward her, an object struck the ground about 10 to 15 foot away. They froze. The woman hesitated, wanting to see what had landed. Then a second, larger object came down even closer, only 8 to 10 feet from her. At that point, her daughter became extremely upset and they quickly left the area. Now, the witness later told me that the foliage was thick and the area was unusually quiet. And the only other people they saw was a runner. She also noted that the deer remained frozen on the hillside as they left. Now, because of the time of day, the heavy footfalls, the deer's behavior, and the thrown objects, I wondered whether the witness and her daughter may have interrupted a hunt or feeding. Rock or object throwing is often reported in Sasquatch encounters and may function as a warning. Now, the Daniels location is especially interesting because it is only about 6 miles downstream from the area where I had my own encounter. Now, another Patapsco Valley incident involved a mother and her teenage son exploring a seldom used section of the park. They were looking for the ruins of an old town that was washed out during the 1970s, and from the beginning, the mother felt watched. The area felt wrong to her. They came across an empty ball field, metal bleachers, and an old shack containing dated equipment. And as they moved through the area, her unease intensified. Eventually, they realized that they were in the wrong place and turned to leave. Her son picked up a stick and struck a tree. Moments later, the mother noticed deep footprints in semi-dry mud. She was certain the tracks had not been there when they first walked in. She tried to recreate the impressions by jumping in the mud, but could not make the marks nearly as deep. Then she realized that they were being followed. And as they moved quickly back toward the vehicle, they heard rustling along the side of the path. Her son glimpsed what he described as an arm. They also heard a strange resonant sound like someone blowing across the top of a jug. Along the way, they saw prints of two sizes, small and large. They also passed what looked like a bedding area in thick, cool grass. Now, as they neared the car and began to feel safer, the son struck a tree with the stick again, and at that moment, a huge roar and scream erupted behind them. The mother grabbed the stick and yelled at him to stop hitting the tree and run. That report contains several classic Sasquatch elements: the feeling of being watched, the sudden appearance of tracks, multiple track sizes, possible bedding, parallel movement, a partial limb sighting, an unusual vocalization, and an aggressive response after wood knocking. Now, taken together, these Patapsco Valley reports form a notable pattern. They all occur within the same river corridor. They involve thick cover, steep terrain, old ruins, limited visibility, and behavior that seems defensive or territorial. Now, the Patapsco River may be the key. Waterways provide travel routes, cover, food sources, and concealment. In Bigfoot reports across North America, river corridors recur as movement zones. Now, Patapsco Valley State Park may not seem like remote wilderness on a map, but anyone who has spent time in its ravines, river trails, abandoned areas, and lesser used sections know how quickly the landscape changes. Sound becomes distorted, visibility narrows, hillsides and thickets create blind spots. You can be close to civilization and still feel completely isolated. And in my view, Sykesville, Daniels, and other Patapsco Valley incidents should not be treated as disconnected stories. They appear to be part of a broader Maryland Bigfoot pattern centered on the Patapsco River corridor. Now, from the Patapsco Valley, we move east into Cecil County, where a modern case appears to combine Bigfoot-type activity, possible cryptid canine tracks, animal disturbance, strange lights, and an unexplained phenomenon on a single active property. Now, one of the more active Maryland locations investigated by my team is a horse farm in Cecil County in northeast Maryland. The property first came to my attention after the resident began finding unexplained footprints around the farm, including large and small hominid-like tracks and possible large canine prints. The witness reported that the tracks first appeared behind a large garage near the horse pasture, then began showing up inside the pasture itself. Now, some prints were larger than the witness's own foot, while others appeared smaller, suggesting possible juvenile and adult-sized impressions. Several showed toe and heel outlines. The witness also noted that the horses' tracks were often mixed in with them and raising concern that something may have been chasing or disturbing the animals. Now, the activity did not stop with the footprints. The resident heard strange nighttime sounds from inside the house, including odd noises outside the bedroom window. In one disturbing incident, something reportedly scratched at the window screen and appeared to try to open it. And when the witness moved to another room, the activity seemed to follow outside and began again at the window. There are already stories of cryptid activity in the surrounding area. One nearby deer hunter reportedly saw a large black hairy creature from a tree stand only minutes from the farm. Another witness saw a large hairy being in the vehicle's headlights on nearby back roads. And a coon hunter in the same general area reported heavy whooping vocalizations and left immediately. Now, on August 12, 2023, the Phantoms of Monsters 14 research team conducted an initial investigation at the property. Timothy Renner, Chad Redding, and I spent approximately 6 hours at the location, remaining until about 10 p.m. The site proved to be very interesting. The audio and video evidence required further review, and Tim and Chad encountered several anomalies on the property that surprised all of us. Later, on August 28, 2023, at approximately 8 p.m., the resident captured a 4-minute video of a UFO or UAP hovering above the trees southwest of the horse farm. The anomaly displayed red and white flashing and undulating lights. According to the witness, it lingered for several minutes before fading away. Now, this was especially notable because Tim Renner and Chad Redding had observed round light anomalies in the same general area during the August 12th investigation. Tim also conducted a dowsing session nearby and experienced something he described as unlike anything he had ever seen before. A wooden dowsing rod was violently pulled toward the ground twice, eventually snapping. Now, the Cecil County horse farm case is unusual because it appears to combine several categories of activity: possible Bigfoot-type tracks, possible cryptid canine prints, disturbed horses, nighttime window activity, strange vocalization in the area, light anomalies, and a recorded UAP event. Now, the horses initially appeared alarmed by the activity, though they seemed to become somewhat accustomed to it over time. The property also has a history of increased death incidents associated with it, adding another layer of strangeness to the location. Now, for Unexplained Maryland, the Cecil County Horse Farm stands out as a modern active case site. It's not simply a single sighting. It's an ongoing location-based investigation involving tracks, animal reactions, possible cryptid activity, and an unexplained aerial phenomena all occurring within the same concentrated area. And I will say that this farm is only about 1.5 miles to 2 miles from the Susquehanna River, and an area where the river actually empties into the Chesapeake Bay, and has historically been a heavy UFO area. So there's a lot of activity in the area. Now, the Cecil County case includes possible canine-like tracks, and that leads us directly into one of Maryland's most unsettling cryptid traditions, the Dwayyo, or upright canine. Now, Maryland's version of the Dogman is often known as the Dwayyo, an upright cryptid canine rooted in folklore of Western Maryland. The name is associated with earlier reports from German and Pennsylvania Dutch settlers, especially farmers who moved into the region from Pennsylvania. Their descriptions were similar to old world werewolf traditions, a large wolf-like creature walking upright on 2 legs. Now, modern reports continue to surface, particularly along the Catoctin Mountain corridor in Frederick County, in Washington County, and on rural roads between Hagerstown, Thurmont, Emmitsburg, and the Antietam region. Now, one of the more recent reports occurred on August 7th, 2023, near Hagerstown. A husband and wife were driving on Route 65 Sharpsburg Pike, south of Rockland Drive, and about 3 miles north of the Antietam National Battlefield. It was around 10 p.m., shortly after a major severe weather outbreak had moved through the region. And as they drove northbound, the husband saw something move fast from an open field on the left side of the road. It was running upright, directly toward the highway. He immediately hit the brakes, realizing that the creature continued its path and might strike him. Both witnesses saw the figure. The wife exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" The creature was black, covered in fur, and running on two legs at an estimated 30 to 35 miles an hour. It had dog-like legs, a narrow waist, a heavier upper body, and a broad chest, pointed upright ears, and a long snout. Now, the witnesses were unsure whether the creature had a tail because its speed and shape drew most of the attention. Now, the driver later returned to the location in daylight and again at night to see whether headlights, shadows, structures, and reflections could have created the illusion. He found nothing in the open field that could account for what they had seen. Now, both witnesses concluded that they had observed a real physical creature. The witness also noted that earlier that day, the region had experienced severe storms, including torrential rain, high winds, hail, and lightning. He wondered whether the creature had been driven out of the mountain area by storm drainage and was storm damage and was returning toward the wooded ridges when it encountered it. Now, another significant report came from October 2019 along Route 15 south between Emmitsburg and Thurmont. The witness was driving home on a misty night after crossing from Pennsylvania into Maryland. Near Little Owens Creek, he saw something standing by the roadside. He described it as a 6 to 7 foot tall upright canine with dark fur, a long snout, pointed ears, muscular limbs, long claws, and bright yellow eyes and a long tail. The creature stood on two legs and stared at him. When he stopped, it let out a terrifying howl that shook him physically and emotionally. The creature then took several steps toward the vehicle. The witness felt paralyzed by fear until another vehicle approached from behind, honked, and passed him. The creature turned towards the lights and sound and giving the witness the chance to accelerate away. Now, that encounter occurred near Catoctin Mountain Park and within a few miles of Camp David, an area already connected to several Dwayyo and upright canine sightings. Taken together, these Maryland cases suggest a recurring pattern. The sightings occur near mountain corridors, creeks, rural highways, heavy woods, and the old travel routes. Now, witnesses described an upright, wolf-like being with speed, power, intelligence, and an overwhelming sense of intimidation. Now, the Dwayyo may be part of Maryland folklore, but modern reports are difficult to dismiss. Whether these witnesses are seeing an unknown cryptid canine, a misidentified animal under unusual conditions, or something tied to the older werewolf traditions, the reports from Sharpsburg Pike and Route 15 add to a long-standing pattern of upright canine encounters in western Maryland. For Unexplained Maryland, the Dwayyo stands as one of the state's most unsettling cryptid legends. Not a ghost, not a typical Bigfoot, but something fast, predatory, and disturbingly wolf-like moving through the dark roads and mountain edges of Maryland. Now, Maryland's upright canine reports are disturbing because they live on the edge of folklore and modern eyewitness testimony. But there's another Maryland creature that may be even more famous and even more tangled in legend, exaggeration, and possibly misidentified cryptid activity. That creature is the Goatman. Now, one of Maryland's most enduring cryptid legends is the Goatman, a creature usually described as part man and part goat. Now, witnesses have claimed it stands 7 to 8 foot tall, weighs several hundred pounds, and has goat-like feet, a powerful human-like upper body, and a horned head and patches of coarse fur. Now, the Goatman is most often associated with Prince George's County, especially Bowie, Glendale, Beltsville, Fletchertown Road, Woodmore, Hydesville, and the rural roads and wooded areas around those communities. Now, the legend reportedly began in the late 1950s when a young couple parked along Zug Road and claimed that a goat-like humanoid struck the hood of their car while holding what appeared to be an axe. On June 1963, another couple walking on Zug Road reportedly saw a tall, ragged, human-like animal watching them from the woods. In April 1971, a farmer near Fletchertown Road claimed to see a large man-like creature feeding on the remains of a pig. Later that same year, the Goatman legend reached the local newspapers. On November 10, 1971, the Prince George's County News ran a front-page story titled, Residents fear Goatman lives. Dog found decapitated in Old Billy. The article describes the mutilation of a dog belonging to April Edwards after she and her friends reportedly heard strange noises and saw a large creature moving in the darkness. 2 weeks later, the same newspaper reported local residents were being harassed by Goatman hunters. In one incident, Fletchertown Road was blocked by people who claimed they had the creature trapped. Now, over the years, other reports followed. A landscaper at Woodmore Country Club allegedly saw a large unknown animal after finding remains on the golf course. Police responding to the Old Glendale Hospital reportedly heard strange sounds but could not locate their source. Teenagers near Billy described the tall, human-like animal running into the woods. A boy at Magruder Park in Hydesville claimed to see the dark figure with red eyes. Like many legends, the Goatman story contains obvious exaggerations. One tale claims the creature killed 14 people in 1962, but there's no known police records confirming that event. Another popular version says the Goatman was created in a failed government experiment at the USDA facility in Beltsville. That story appears to be manufactured folklore. Now, in my opinion, the classic axe-wielding Maryland Goatman is mostly an urban legend. However, the legend may have absorbed real reports of large, upright, hairy humanoids in Maryland's wooded areas. Some Goatman sightings overlap geographically with Bigfoot-type reports, including the broader activity pattern around central Maryland and the Sykesville Monster flap of the early 1970s. So while I do not believe the Goatman is literally a horned creature carrying an axe, the legend may preserve something older and stranger. Repeated reports of upright, animal-like beings moving through Maryland's forest and back roads. Now, for Unexplained Maryland, the Goatman remains important because it sits on the crossroads of folklore, cryptid sightings, hoaxes, fear, and possible misidentified Bigfoot activity. Now, before Goatman became Maryland's best-known monster legend, another creature ruled the mountain newspapers and rural imagination of Western Maryland. It had wings, claws, a terrible scream, and a name that still echoes through Frederick County, the Snallygaster. One of Maryland's strangest legendary creatures is the Snallygaster, a flying beast most closely associated with Frederick County, Middletown Valley, South Mountain, and the Blue Ridge region. The name is believed to come from a German phrase, Schnellergeist, meaning quick spirit or fast spirit. German immigrants who settled in the Blue Ridge Mountains during the 1730s brought with them stories of frightening spirits, dragons, and winged monsters. Now, over time, these traditions appear to have merged into Maryland's legend of the Snallygaster. The creature is usually described as a monstrous winged beast with enormous wings, a long, sharp beak, steel-like claws, and sometimes one eye in the middle of its forehead. Other versions describe it as a green-scaled dragon-like or bird-like. In some accounts, it screeches horribly, preys on livestock, frightens children, and moves with unnatural speed. Now, the Snallygaster first became a newspaper sensation in early 1909, when reports appeared in the Middletown Valley Register. For several weeks, the beast seemed to be everywhere at once. It was allegedly seen in New Jersey, West Virginia, Ohio, and then Maryland. One early witness, James Harding, described the creature as having huge wings, a sharp beak, steel claws, and a single eye. He said it made shrill screams and looked like a cross between a tiger and a vampire. Another story claimed the beast killed a man by piercing his neck and draining his blood. Now, in Maryland, the Snallygaster was reportedly seen near Cumberland, where it was said to be warming its wings over a brick kiln. It also reported near Hagerstown, Lover's Leap, south of Middletown, Gaplin, Burkittsville, Sharpsburg, and Emmitsburg. Now, some stories even claim it laid enormous eggs in the mountain. The reports became so sensational, one account claimed President Theodore Roosevelt might have postponed a trip to Europe in order to lead an expedition to capture the creature. Now, the Smithsonian Institution was also said to have taken an interest after a reported sighting near Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Now, the 1909 flap ended near Emmitsburg, where three men allegedly fought the creature outside a railroad station for nearly an hour and a half before chasing it into the woods of Carroll County. Then, after more than 2 decades of silence, the Snallygaster returned in the 1930s. News reports came from the South Mountain and Middletown Valley region. This time, the creature was described as being as large as a dirigible, with tentacle-like arms and the ability to change its size, shape, and color. The legend eventually gave the creature a dramatic ending. According to the story, the Snallygaster was flying over Frog Hollow in Washington County when it was drawn to the fumes of a massive vat of moonshine. Overcome by the vapor, it dropped into the boiling mash. Revenue agents arrived soon after and destroyed the still with dynamite, supposedly obliterating the creature's remains along with it. That ending was almost certainly a newspaper invention. In fact, many Snallygaster stories were likely created or exaggerated by local newspaper editors, possibly as a form of rivalry or publicity. But the creature's roots are older than 1909 newspaper stories. The legend draws from Pennsylvania Dutch folklore, Germanic spirit lore, dragon stories, and mountain monster traditions. Now, even though the Snallygaster is often called Maryland's monster, is discussed far less than the Goatman or the Sykesville Monster. Still, the legend persists. There have been occasional modern hunts in places like Patapsco and Cunningham Falls State Parks, and I've even heard of claims that the Snallygaster den was once located near Camp David. Whether the Snallygaster began as folklore, newspaper fiction, misidentification, or something stranger, it remains one of Maryland's most unusual cryptid legends. A winged monster of the mountains, born from immigrant folklore and kept alive by fear, rumor, and dark wooded ridges of western Maryland. Now, the Snallygaster may have been inflated by newspaper editors, but Maryland has produced other winged and bird-like reports that are much harder to dismiss. One of the strangest involved a large, colorful, unknown bird seen repeatedly near Patapsco Valley State Park. I came to call it the Patapsco Phoenix. Now, one of the stranger cases from Maryland's Patapsco Valley involves a series of reports from 1985 to 1987 describing a large, colorful bird-like creature seen near Patapsco Valley State Park, close to Ilchester, Thistle Road, River Road, Hilltop Road, and the Old Mill Village. I used to work nearby there. The first report came in May 5th, 1985, when I received a call from Alfred M., who said he and two other men had seen a large bird-like creature perched in a hickory tree while driving south on Thistle Road toward River Road. The location bordered Patapsco Valley State Park in southwest Baltimore County. Now, Alfred stopped the vehicle, and the witnesses watched the creature for several minutes. It eventually flew from the tree and landed about 50 feet from the road, giving them a clear look. Alfred described it as standing 4 to 5 feet tall, with a greenish-blue body, a bright red head, long, thick legs, visible talons, and large, slanted yellow eyes. He estimated the wingspan at 15 foot or more. The creature made a clucking and cackling sounds before spreading its wings and flying east. Now, Alfred also said it also reminded him of a strange cross between a dragon and a peacock. Now, at first, I considered ordinary explanations, including a turkey vulture or an escaped peacock. I later learned that a peacock farm had existed in the area decades earlier, but I found no evidence to confirm that such a bird was responsible. Now, later that year, another report surfaced near Hilton area of Patapsco Valley State Park on Hilltop Road. The witness, Darlene M., said she and her daughter were walking along Hilltop Road when a huge bird flew directly toward them. It came within 20 feet before suddenly turning and disappearing into the woods. Darlene described a vibrant red head, fierce eyes, red wings tipped with large green feathers, and an overall appearance reminiscent of an old illustration she later found of the Feng Huang, also known as the Chinese phoenix. She said the resemblance was striking. Now, on April 29th, 1986, several employees at the local paper mill where I worked at reportedly saw a large bird standing in the loading area. Their description suggested a very large peacock, but there were odd differences. The bird had a red head and lacked the long ornamental plumes normally associated with peacocks. I also saw the creature, and that description is very close to what I actually saw as well. Then, in January 1987, a truck driver named Robert S. was traveling south on Thistle Road when a huge bird flew across the road in front of the vehicle. There was snow on the ground, and the creature was silhouetted clearly enough for him to see get a quick but detailed look. Robert said it looked like a dragon, was powerfully built, and appeared to be as long as his truck was wide. He also described a red head and greenish blue body and wings. Now, the final known sighting occurred in June 30th, 1987. A Baltimore Gas and Electric employee named David was working with a partner along the power line that runs through the state park. North of Hilltop Road, near the old mill village, the line passes closely to an abandoned church graveyard that had been overtaken by woods. Now, David heard rustling and first assumed it was a deer. Then he saw a large bird-like creature rise from a rock, spread its wings, and vanish. He later described it as resembling a griffin, though he admitted he did not get a very good look at it. The sight shocked him enough that he did not want to return to the location. Now, these reports remain difficult to classify. The peacock explanation is possible in some cases, especially given the area's reported history of peacocks, but it doesn't fully account for the creature's size, repeated red head descriptions, and enormous wingspans, talons, powerfully builds, and the repeated comparison to a dragon, phoenix, or griffin. The witness, Darlene, may have been closest when she compared it to a mythical firebird. Now, whether these sightings involved an escaped exotic bird, a misidentified known species, or unknown avian anomaly, or something stranger, the Patapsco Phoenix remains one of the most unusual creature reports that I have personally investigated in Maryland. Now, for Unexplained Maryland, this case stands apart because it does not fit neatly into Bigfoot, winged humanoid, UFO, and ghost categories. It is simply a strange, recurring series of sightings involving a large, brilliant, bird-like creature in the wooded Patapsco Valley. Now we leave the wooded ridges and river valleys and move into the city where one of the Maryland's creepiest recurring anomalies has been reported in broad daylight. Not a monster in the woods, not a creature on a rural road, but a tall, red-cloaked figure was walking through West Baltimore while everyone nearby seemed not to notice it. Now, the West Side Phantom is one of the stranger urban anomalies I've encountered in Maryland reports. The witness described seeing a bizarre figure in West Baltimore about 2004. He was paying attention to his mirrors when he noticed a crowd of people standing on the corner. Then from behind the crowd, a very tall figure walked out. It was wearing a bright red robe with a hood over its head and a cane in its hand. The arms of the robe covered the hands. The hood covered the entire face, but the strangest part was that no one around seemed to react. The witness thought at first that people were going to harass the figure. The neighborhood was not the kind of place where someone would want to draw attention, but the figure simply lurched along without anyone looking at it. And according to the witness, the being had to be close to 7 feet tall, even though it was hunched over. It was daylight. The robe was bright red. It walked straight through the crowd of people, yet no one acknowledged it. The witness felt that the robe might have been concealing a serious physical deformity, and the cane seemed to support that possibility. But the bright red robe made no sense if the goal was to avoid attention. The witness said he always wondered what the robe was hiding, though he felt lucky that he did not know. Now, this report interested me because I had heard of similar phantoms in the Baltimore metro area years earlier. I lived in the Baltimore area for about 40 years and heard stories from my wife's relatives and neighbors about a red cloaked figure in the Park Circle neighborhood near Druid Hill Park during the 1980s. Now, each sighting I received involved a person seeing the figure from a vehicle during the day. The unknown entity wore a bright red hooded cloak and carried a cane. At the time, I looked into the sightings but could not find anything concrete. Still, I was surprised to later hear that a similar figure may have remained active for years afterward. Now, for Unexplained Maryland, the West Side Phantom stands out because it appears in an urban environment in daylight, in plain view. The disturbing detail is not simply the figure itself. It's the apparent lack of reaction from everyone around it. Not all Maryland hauntings are frightening. Some are quiet, personal, and deeply emotional. This next account comes from St. Michael's, Maryland, and involves a man, his dog, and what may have been one final walk together. Now, in the late summer of 1984, I was preparing for my annual trip to Ocean City, Maryland. Before leaving, I called my friend George, who lived in St. Michael's, to let him know I would be stopping by his house on my way back from the beach. It had become a tradition. We would sit on his porch, eat crabs, drink a few beers, and catch up. Now, during the call, George asked me, by the way, do you still conduct your investigations? I told him that I did. So on occasion, I asked what was going on. He said he would wait until I got there. So several days later, I arrived at George's house. He lived in a beautiful old neighborhood with restored early 19th century homes, quiet streets, trees, greenery, and a two-story colonial house surrounded by a rail fence. George greeted me, but I could tell something was bothering him. Finally, I asked why he had brought up my paranormal investigations. He said, I saw something recently. George then told me about his elderly neighbor, Frank Shipley. Frank had passed away in May. A few days before his death, he had asked George if he would take care of his dog, Max, if anything happened to him. Now, Max was a male boxer and a good dog. George agreed. A week or so later, Frank passed away. George became concerned when he didn't see Frank walking Max in the morning or evening. He knocked on the door, got no answer, and called the police. Frank was found sitting in an armchair. Max was lying beside him. Afterward, Max came to live with George. The next evening, George was sitting on the porch watching a ball game on television. Max was lying on the porch swing. It was about 8 p.m., and it was starting to get dark. Suddenly, Max jumped to his feet and ran to the fence by the sidewalk. He sat there for a few seconds and started walking along the fence from left to right. Then he returned to the porch and sat down on the steps. About 15 minutes later, Max jumped up again and ran toward the right edge of the fence. He sat for a few seconds, then began walking toward the fence from right to left. That was when George noticed a mist moving outside the fence. George moved along with the mist until he reached the end of the fence. Then he returned to the porch, sat by the door, and whined. Now, George left him inside. Max went into the kitchen, ate his food, and went directly to sleep. A week later, I was speaking with George on the phone. I mentioned the mist and Max's behavior. George asked what I thought it was. I told him it was probably residual energy connected to Frank's nightly walks with Max. I explained that some spirit energies appear to replay like a looped film, and that is not likely nothing. It was nothing to be afraid of. And then I asked, by the way, how's Max? George replied, oh yeah, Max died the night you left for home. Now, I've always wondered whether Frank and Max found another plane where they would continue their daily walks together. Maybe they still walk that old neighborhood in St. Michael's. Now, for Unexplained Maryland, this case offers something different. It's not a monster encounter, cryptid sighting, or an urban phantom. It's a reminder that some hauntings may be less about fear and more about loyalty, memory, and the bonds that survive death. Now, Maryland's strange history is not confined to a single region or type of phenomenon. In Patapsco Valley, we find Bigfoot activity, thrown objects, tracks, roars, and unexplained firebird-like creature. In Cecil County, we find a modern active case involving tracks, disturbed animals, window activity, strange lights, and a recorded UAP. In Western Maryland, we find the Dwayyo and the Snallygaster, two creatures rooted in old world folklore, but still capable of disturbing modern witnesses. In Prince George's County, the Goatman remains one of the state's most recognizable legends, even if the truth behind it may be stranger and more complicated than the popular story. In Baltimore, Red Cloak Phantom appears in daylight and moves through crowds without being noticed. And in St. Michael's, a loyal dog may have followed his deceased owner one last time. That is what makes Maryland so compelling. The state is a crossroads of old folklore, colonial history, river valleys, mountain ridges, military zones, rural farms, urban neighborhoods, and haunted landscapes. The unexplained here is not limited to deep wilderness. It appears along highways and parks, beside farm pastures, on city streets, and in quiet historic neighborhoods. If you had an unexplained encounter in Maryland involving Bigfoot, upright canines, strange lights, haunted locations, phantom figures, winged anomalies, UFOs, cryptids, or other high-strangeness events, I want to hear from you. Please include the location, date, time, weather conditions, witness details, and any unusual events that occurred before, during, and after the encounter. This has been Unexplained Maryland. Now, please subscribe to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, activate the notifications, and share this presentation with others interested in the unexplained. If you have experienced something unexplained in Maryland or elsewhere, I encourage you to document every detail you remember. Even details that initially seem insignificant may become important when compared to other reports. You can submit your account to Phantoms and Monsters. Witness confidentiality and anonymity will be respected when requested. Now, if you sent a chat donation this evening, your consideration is much appreciated. Your support helps us continue documenting witness testimony, investigating unusual incidents, and preserving these accounts for future research. So let's start the question and answers. All caps, please. Anybody got a question? Dagnammit, do you think the Snallygaster is similar to the New Jersey Devil in the Pond Barrens? There may be an association. I have thought that as well, even though, they are part of two versions of folklore. But there also have been modern sightings and more so of the Jersey Devil. It could very well be a similar being. I'm not sure. The sightings do in a way sound familiar, though. The Jersey Devil is supposedly said to be like a goat, horse, wing being mix, and the Snallygaster is more like a dragon. I don't know if the size comparison is mutual, but it does seem like it's a very similar creature. Can Squatch, do you have any reports of paranormal or cryptid activity on government property facilities in Maryland? I do, and it involves Bigfoot, in particular at the Edgewood facility near Aberdeen Proving Grounds. There was supposedly, and unproven, but I was told by a retired United States Air Force serviceman, or an officer actually, who started working at Edgewood after he retired, about possibility of Bigfoot-like creatures being housed there and escaping. And in fact, we had a large flap of Bigfoot sightings in Baltimore County and Harford County not long after that supposed escape by several of these creatures. I don't know if there's anything related to that or not, but it was interesting. And it kind of followed the same pattern of what the Sykesville Monster may have actually been with, because I think there may have been an escape of that creature as well from a facility along the Patapsco River. Dagnammit, do you think you saw a caveman when you were fishing in Maryland? No, I don't think it was a caveman, even though it did look more human than it did ape. I do believe it was a Bigfoot, and I've thought about that for years and years and years, and I still believe it was a Bigfoot, and it may have been may very well been associated with the earlier sightings of the Sykesville Monster that at least a dozen people had seen back in 1971 through 72. Jose Sanchez, could that red-headed large bird have been a lesser-known type of vulture? I don't know. That was a pretty good size of the creature, and I don't know. It could have been. It was interesting that it was seen in the way it was, since vultures will usually, or buzzards will usually not come to the ground unless they're feeding, and they'll roost in a tree, and then they start circling above when if there's any scavenging to be done until they come down and feed. This thing was flying all around the place, so I don't think it was that. Could it have been a peacock? Possibly, but I saw this so-called creature as well, and the body style and size did resemble a peacock, though bigger, and there was no plumage that even associated with a peacock. So I don't know what we saw. I don't know what they saw. But with 4 sightings in an area within 1 mile square, that's pretty unusual. So I don't know exactly what this thing was, though I haven't heard of any sightings since then. Alice Staring, would you follow a dogman to his lair? No. That's the easiest answer to a question I can ever. I wouldn't even get near one of those things if I could avoid it. I mean, it's not one of those things I really want to run into. Even though there's all indications that these things are not too aggressive, but I don't even get the opportunity to do that. That's one cryptid I hope I never run up against. Ruptured Duck. Good evening, Lon. What did you say Dogman is called in Maryland? Dwayyo. Dwayyo. Can Squatch, what do you think the Goatman is connected to? I don't know. I think it is more of an urban legend. I really do think it's a Bigfoot, because we've had a lot of Bigfoot sightings in that area. Billy and Laurel, those woods around there, have had Bigfoot sightings. I've investigated Bigfoot in that area up until even 3 years ago. That Washington, D.C. Suburb area north of the city, even as far southeast as Andrews Air Force Base, we've had sightings of Bigfoot. Real Truth Ken, I missed the line. I appreciate your super check, $5. Thank you. Jose Sanchez, have you seen the recent video online of Bigfoot looking through a tree and it's close with bright colored eyes? What do you think about it? I looked at it. I don't know what to think about it. Brett sent the photo to me, the video to me recently. I don't know. Unfortunately, with AI nowadays, and it's hard to really tell. I think the movement and the way it reacted, it could possibly be a Bigfoot, but I'm not really sure. I hate to even judge on many of these videos anymore. Lala Bright, why are so many reports clustered along river valleys? I think because of transportation. I think it's easier for them to move along the river valleys. Many times there are trails or cleared areas near these rivers or near these streams. It's easy for them to move. They can keep cover because of caves or rock formations nearby. I think there's a lot of different ways it could be done, but it does seem that we do get most reports near rivers and streams. You know, Maryland, and you live in Maryland, it's heavily forested, so. Michelle, do you think the Bigfoot are in any way military related? I think some of these sightings were. I think my sighting was. I think the one I mentioned with Edgewood was, and some of the subsequent sightings may have been involved with government. Unless we get any corroborating evidence, though, it's really hard to tell other than just by hearsay. But I think there's a very good possibility that there's something connected there. Lala Bright, what environmental factors appear most often? Well, interestingly enough, even though the state parks aren't really open at night, we get a lot of daytime sightings of a lot of different things in Maryland for whatever reason. We've had cryptid canine sightings in Rock State Park during the day when that place is open. We've had 2 of them, and I'll have to talk about those in a later time. I just didn't have room to put it all in there. My sighting was during the day. Most Bigfoot sightings are during the day. Many occur in areas that are parks, in locations that are closed. The only nighttime sightings we usually get are at private property that are near these areas. Michelle, do you think the Snallygaster are like Thunderbirds? I don't think so. I don't know. You know, what they originally saw and what later came down as folklore, I don't know what they saw. Could it, like the earlier question, could it be related to the Jersey Devil? Very well could be. You know, the whole Jersey Devil phenomena, even though we talk about mother leads and, you know, the demon being born by her, those sightings actually started out on Maryland Eastern Shore and moved up. They moved up from, what county was that? Was it Chester County? Chester County on Eastern Shore, it moved up north through Delaware up into New Jersey. And when it got up to New Jersey, I guess that's when the whole mother leads thing started and became part of the folklore. But the sightings of something similar to that had been seen for almost a century before that. Which case has the strongest corroborating evidence? I guess mine. I don't know. I mean, there was just so much that happened, and I had so many government people and cops and such who verified it happened. You know, Maryland's strange like that. I mean, there's a lot of sightings, very few witnesses, and very few corroborating, you know, evidence. Though we get sightings in areas that are very close by. And in most cases, the witnesses are very forthcoming and don't seem like people who would literally make a report unless something actually happened or they believe something actually happened. So, yeah, Maryland's an interesting state. And, you know, you can tie a lot what happens in South Central Pennsylvania along with what happens in Maryland as well, because they're pretty well connected. Lala, what Maryland location gives you the creepiest feeling? That's hard. I would believe, well, it would be a haunting. I mean, it would be Antietam. You know, Antietam has always freaked me out for some reason because I pick up some of the weirdest stuff there, even more so than at Gettysburg. It's just the terrain. There was so much death there, and just like Gettysburg, but it was a location that was flatter. It had a lot of fields and a lot of wood patches, and of course, it had the Antietam creek moving through there, and the bridge with all the fighting at the bridge and such. It's very closely related to what happened in Gettysburg, but it's different and creepier to me anyway. And I have talked to several people, even people who have worked there, rangers and such, and they find it more creepy than Gettysburg for the most part. So take it for what it's worth. But Antietam is one of the creepiest places I've ever been to. Michelle, do you think the red caped figure is a phantom or a monster? I think it was a spirit. I think it was a manifested spirit of some type of what it was. I don't know. But the fact that it moved in areas that had a lot of people and would have been easily identified by, West Baltimore, as you know, is not the safest place to be at. And that whole Park Circle, Druid Hill Park area, especially back then, was pretty rough. And for something like that to stand out like that, to be seen, there'd be some activity. That just didn't happen. Demon Tooth, anything near Ocean City, Maryland? We're going there next week. I don't know. I do know. I saw a story today, and I don't know where you're going to be at in Ocean City, but they've got a problem with coyotes down there now for whatever reason. And, coming on the beaches as well. And I don't know what to tell you other than that, but you don't hear a whole lot of Ocean City. Maybe a couple of haunted locations at some of the older hotels occasionally. But not a whole lot. As far as cryptid activity, it's pretty non-existent, though there have been some Bigfoot sightings in areas near Ocean City, but not at Ocean City. Can Squatch, have you seen Civil War ghosts at Antietam? Absolutely. There's a lot of activity down there. A lot of manifestations, very similar to what happens in Gettysburg. A lot of repeated stuff, where it kind of runs on a continuing basis. I've seen some things, especially in the Sunken Road area, pretty active around the Dunker Church, the east cornfield area, where there was a lot of death there. Yeah, it's a lot going on there. Michelle, do you think we could go looking for werewolves together one day? Now, I told you we would. If we go to Rock State Park, I think we're going to go look around. I've had two pretty harrowing encounters during the day at Rock State Park, so look for evidence. Yeah. Run into one. Not particularly cool about that, but we'll see what we can come up with. Anything else, folks? Well, I want to, again, thank you all for coming on tonight and being in the chat, and great questions. So, until next time, remain observant, trust your instincts, and remember that the world around us may be far stranger than what we've actually been led to believe. So have a nice evening. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday. Oh, and I want to mention Friday, July 24th, I'm going to be back on Coast to Coast. So I will do a show that night, but later on that evening at 1 in the morning, I will be on Coast to Coast, 1 in the morning in the East. I'll be on Coast to Coast. So mark the calendar. So anyway, see you next Friday and have a good night. Talk to you later. Bye.